It says, sorry, we're having trouble playing this video. But can you see it on Facebook? Can you see it already? Because I can't see it from this side. Yeah, right. You can see it. Okay. It don't show it on here. Okay, good. Bye. Okay, good. Bye. Well, folks, we're about ready to start. We're right up on 6 o'clock. I'm looking at my favorite timekeeper, my phone. So we're right at 5:59 of this one. Yep. So we got about 30 seconds, if that. Well, welcome to another edition of Throwing Down Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Binding. I'm the host and also the chair of the MORD board. MORD stands for Movement Omaha for Race Equity. And tonight we have a special guest. This is not his first experience on our show. And we have Adam Fletcher Sass, who is a local grassroots historian who's been taking upon himself some research, many of the significant aspects of North Omaha. He grew up in North Omaha, and he's known for his Facebook posts, his webpage posting, and apparently a lot of stuff deals with African Americans and some of the artifacts as well as the buildings in our community in North Omaha. Also, he lives in Olympia, Washington, and he's also a prolific writer, and very much impressed with that. Adam has written several books on different topics and so on, related to the Black experience with the North Omaha. And his primary interest is in documenting events, location, and buildings in North Omaha, as I said earlier. There are other amateur historians in our community. Still, one task that Adam did that I initially met him was his obituary on Matthew Stelly. Matthew Stelly and I were both born in Hastings about the same time. We came through the wormhole and came in Nebraska. He did a wonderful 10-page bit on Matt, and that's how I got to know Adam a little bit more. Adam, by the way, Matthew Stelly taught in Black Studies for a number of years, and some years ago we tried to do a little tribute, and they kind of backed out of that. So even Black Studies, where he taught at, wouldn't do much on him. But we were happy that Adam did that for us as a community. Basically, he's also working other programs. We know we have programs in the community called Making History Visible. We have the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation. We also have Black Studies. We also have other entities who deal with African American and Black culture in North Omaha. So we're excited that these entities exist. And one of the questions I'm going to ask Adam is, what's his relationship to that? But before we get in that, we're here to throw out some heavy light and talk about North Omaha. And again, this is the beginning of Black History Month. And so this is one of those important events that we like to lay out from more to help people learn. But first, let me just ask you, what is your relationship with those other entities, Adam, that I mentioned earlier?
Thank you, Jamal. I appreciate that introduction. So to begin, I think it's important to say that not only do we have these current entities, right, the ones that you listed, and so many more, people in the neighborhood who are really stepping up, standing up, and representing African American history in Omaha. I love and respect all of them. I have no animosity. I have nothing but complete appreciation, honoring, and respect for everything that's been done before. Of course, I stand on the shoulders of giants, including those common peers right now, as well as our historical history advocates, people like Bertha Calloway and of course Matthew, but also people like Fred Dixon, who helped wrote the 1930s Negroes in Nebraska history that had never been compiled. It was the first one of its kind in the entire state. And then Harrison Pinkett, who was a successful African American attorney in Omaha, and he wrote one of the first compilations of Black history in the city, specifically in the 1930s, and several other people. However, I'm unaffiliated. I am just a guy out here doing my thing. Where I popped into it was starting way back in 2007, way back 15 years. But 2007, Wikipedia started to take off, and I found a lot of my friends were going to Wikipedia for information, but there was nothing on there about Omaha. I kept finding stuff about Chicago's history. I figured if Chicago could have history on Wikipedia, then I could write about Omaha. But I didn't just limit it to history. I ended up writing about everything related to Omaha, the cuisine and the culture and the music. But the more and more that I looked in the history canon, the literature, the more I discovered that neither was North Omaha represented specifically, whereas South Omaha got some representation. Downtown, of course, got representation. Cute places like Dundee and Benson and all those different areas, they all got representation, but North Omaha was largely ignored. And then, of course, in the middle of North Omaha is African American history of the city, because the more that I looked at it, the more magnanimous it seemed. Just this huge, gigantic reality that Black people have been a part of the city's history since before the city was founded. But that wasn't there on Wikipedia, but it also wasn't in the old history books. The Douglas County Historical Society wasn't talking about it. The Durham Museum was not talking about it. In 2007, nobody was talking about it. So what I did, especially online, was started to carve that out on Wikipedia. Then I found that Wikipedia was full of plagiarism and all kinds of different problems. So I took it off and I built NorthOmahaHistory.com. And since I started that website in 2012, I've put more than 650 articles related to people, places, and events about North Omaha, but specifically to Black history in North Omaha and into the city as a whole. So 650 articles, Jamal. Nobody's done that kind of thing before. Even Bertha, with all of her determination, she did so much, and she built a museum that's going to last forever, hopefully. But the breadth of what she covered, with what she was able to educate the public on, was limited because of the technology at the time didn't allow it. And of course, the racist systems that kept her held up didn't allow it.
Yeah, Adam, I want to cut in. I got a lot of questions I want to get to. We only have a short time to deal with it. But one of the things I know that you did a story, and again, we talked about it earlier, about police brutality, the viciousness of the Omaha Police Department towards African American. You documented all the way back to the late 1800s, all the way up to the present situation. Was there any contact between those officers of the police department, and particularly police department of people of color, about your historical report? Did you get any official contact from Omaha City's finest about some of the narratives that you laid out in that 50-page report?
So, Matthew, I'm sorry, Ajamal, I was disappointed to see that the city didn't respond in any way. There was no response from the Omaha Police Department. To back up that report and what you had seen, I also ended up doing a report on just the history of African-American policemen in Omaha. And it's another 49-page document.
And the police department in Omaha didn't reach out to you?
Nothing.
So-called diversity-loving department? Okay, keep going.
I went all the way back to 1891 when the first Black police officer was hired in Omaha. Frank Bellamy, his name was. And Frank Bellamy was with the police force for 4 years before he got ridden out of town. But in the meantime, I put all together all this history, and nobody reached out. Just to kind of layer it on, I also took on the history of Black firefighters in Omaha, which we know they have their organization. They have a beautiful facility on Lake Street, but they didn't reach out. Nobody has reached out to me. Wow. Because of these reports and because of what I found and shared.
Well, that's
and so what I'm doing, Jamal, and just to say that real quick, I've got more than 12,000 followers on Facebook, another 4,500 on Instagram, and people are having these conversations with me every day. And it's just me, a goofy white guy, talking with these folks about this history that's not mine. At best, I'm a tourist. At best, I grew up in the neighborhood, but that doesn't give me any special permission or knowledge. And the reality is, I'm just trying to represent what I know and then dial back to people like Jamal who actually do know. And I'm just not getting it. People aren't responding that way, especially from the city, especially from the system.
And many people probably surprised because these guys sit around and pontificate all the time and hang out in those 360 meetings. You think there's some of the smartest blades in the shelf or something, or in the drawer, but they're not, apparently, obviously. My other question I'm going to switch up is, you were working on several projects. So you're talking about, I saw the Free Child Institute of Youth Engagement. I didn't know anything about that. You have a Sound Out North Omaha History. What are those two about? Because again, we don't hear that in the media or in the news or whatever, because they don't cover something like that. But give us briefly what those two projects are about.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing those up. The Free Child Institute for Youth Engagement, I founded in 2001 with a group of youth advocates from around the world. The whole point is to shine the light on the ways that young people of color, low-income youth, undereducated youth, under-opportunity youth of all kinds around the world are becoming engaged throughout their communities. Jamal, I'm not talking about one little tiny phenomenon where one group of young people is making one little bit of difference. I'm talking about millions of young people all around the world. I wrote a book that just came out last year. It was published by Peter Lang Academic Publishers. It's called Democracy Deficit Disorder, Learning Democracy from Young People. And it's all about these youth who are saving the planet, who are challenging antipathy and challenging authoritarianism, and they're doing it in the United States, in Canada, and United Kingdom, all across the African continent, down in Australia. young people are leading this march and we're not even paying attention to them. So that's what the Free Child Institute for Youth Engagement is all about at freechild.org. And then the other program that you mentioned is I call it soundout.org. Soundout.org is all about meaningful student involvement in schools. My master's is in educational leadership and policy studies. And in my work, I have had the opportunity to work with just over 1,000 K-12 schools across the United States and in Canada and Brazil and a couple other places, all focused on this question of student voice and meaningful student involvement. Student voice, young people are expressing themselves, their opinions, their beliefs, their ideas about schools all the time. But schools, it's not a question of whether or not young people are sharing it. It's about whether or not adults are willing to listen to what they're saying. They are showing us the way. They are showing us the future. Even if we don't want to hear what they have to say, they're still telling us and showing us. So my meaningful student involvement model basically teaches schools how to embrace students as partners in the education system instead of as passive recipients of what adults hand down to them. So at the end of the day, all my enterprises, whether it's NorthOmahaHistory.com, whether it's soundout.org, whether it's the Free Child Institute, is all about empowering and engaging people and changing the world around them, whether it's in North Omaha, whether it's in schools, or whether it's the entire world and what it looks like.
By the way, what's your relationship with the UNO Education Department of Omaha Public Schools on these projects? Are they doing anything with you locally?
Yeah, so I have, again, no relationship with either OPS or UNO or any of the other programs. I have talked with the leader of the Making Histories Visible project through OPS. It's a beautiful program. I got a lot of respect for it because they're doing that youth engagement work that I just mentioned in one respect of having young people actually research the community, doing oral histories, doing a lot of different elements like that. And I've got a lot of love for what they do. I've also have a lot of love for UNO's Service Learning Department, which is actually partnered with an organization called Freedomtainment that does a Malcolm X Juneteenth celebration at Malcolm X every year for the last couple of years. Calvin Johnson and other folks are involved in that, and it's an incredible organization. UNO's service learning program has gotten these students out in the community, which is what we need. But I don't have any formal relationship with either.
Let me switch up a little bit. We look at the demographics in our community, and you look at the disparities between the various racial groups. It's apparent that many of these nonprofits need to be more effective. Even some things you said earlier, some have not. Some of them don't deal with breadcrumbs well. They have historical issues they need to help make better for people, and particularly oppressed African Americans. And my question is, what can historians do to help reverse some of these craziness that some of us act like didn't exist and don't exist today, from your vantage point as a lay historian?
One of the things that I came across in my studies is this history of the African American population in Omaha. An actual history of it had never existed. Nobody's ever done a demographic breakdown that lays out the literal numbers of African Americans who lived in Omaha all the way from 1854 when the city was founded all the way to 2024. And so what I did was just a simple breakdown. It ended up being 25 pages, but it's a simple breakdown of just the Black population. I believe that what historians have to do, whether they are formally and academically trained or whether they are lay historians, amateurs, or anything in between, is that we have to engage with the hardest topics in the most difficult ways. And the way that I've chosen to take that up is to address white supremacy head on. White supremacy is terrorism. White supremacy is this lie that we can tell ourselves over and over again, especially in Omaha, especially to make white people feel good about themselves, but also to oppress African Americans and other people of color. And what we got to do as historians is engage with that difficult topic and other difficult topics like it. Classism needs to be brought out in Omaha for what it is. The reality is that Omaha doesn't want to address its classist roots. It doesn't want to address its racist roots. It doesn't want to address its sexist roots. And because of that ignorance and because of that determination to maintain that oppression of those folks, it's just not changing. The situation doesn't change. All the well-meaning initiatives, all the great amounts of money that get poured into the community don't matter unless they address these things head on. And not just by African-American people for African-American people, but also by white people for white people. Nobody can address my ignorance better than me. And I'm pretty ignorant. Even as a well-meaning white guy, I'm still pretty ignorant. I've got to address that, and I've got to get that checked as often as I can. So I'm throwing all these, we'll call it hooks out into the water, hoping for some fish to bite on them. And every now and then it happens. Every now and then the public engages with the topic and they dig right in. I just put up a new article on the history of the building at 2314 North 24th Street. It's where Unique Cuts Barbershop is located. I just put it up yesterday. In the 24 hours since that article went online, more than 500 people have liked the article, 100 people have commented on it, and they're really engaging with it. I think that's what historians have to do, is spark the conversation. Don't just be a quiet voice that's hoarding information in the background, be a loud voice that's putting it out there for people to interact with. And that's what we got to do.
You know, as you were saying that, it just started hitting me. I was looking at the Early Childhood Buffett Institute, and I saw that they don't have any black men working there. They got like 20 zillion women. It's like, how do you talk about families and you've met a very important part of our community? I look at the Douglas County Sarpy Learning Community, same thing. So you wonder what kind of great white saviors, and they bring some of these incompetent personalities who have never set foot in North Omaha to run these organizations. And I'm just wondering how you're going to help families if you don't have the nuclear family engaged on these different levels. But anyway, that's another topic. I'm going to switch over to, we have many lazy people, I call them do-nothingers in our community, heading nonprofits from so on and so on. How do you set accomplishments or pace for your various projects? In other words, you have a lot of stuff that's out there. How do you measure success? Because it's obvious some of these nonprofits don't have these strategic plans or success, but how do you as an individual say that you're successful in what you do as a historian on different levels?
Jamal, one of the things that I try to do every year for the last couple of years, I've done a by the numbers sketch. And basically, I break down 50 different data points and lay out, this is exactly what I've done for the year. And it's everything as mundane as the number of articles that I've written, the number of graphics that I've developed, the number of podcasts I recorded. I record a podcast that comes out once a month or so. And basically, I just lay those numbers out. But the other things that I do is talk about the website visitors. I talk about the members of the groups on Facebook and on other social media, the number of visits or media hits that I've gotten in Omaha, whatever those things are. Look at those basic kind of data, and that's super interesting for me. But the other thing that I do, Jamal, I look at the scholarly papers. I look at the books. I look to see where people are talking about North Omaha history, not just as I've written and recorded it, but also as other people have. Because basically, what I would go out on a limb to suggest is that since 2007, when I started this campaign, the entire demographic, the entire reality of North Omaha history has shifted. People had not talked about it actively in a sophisticated way since Matthew Stelly had stopped his campaign, since the Great Plains Black History Museum ran into its financial difficulties in the 90s. People weren't talking about it. It just wasn't generating any heat. And so my whole point was to bring up the heat. And it's worked, Jamal, whether that is through any of those different metrics or as basic as getting a note from a 100-year-old woman in Ingleside, California, who said, Adam, you reintroduced me to my grandmother when you shared her picture that nobody in my family has ever seen. It was a lady who was the granddaughter of a woman named Ophelia Clemens, who had disappeared from the city's record. Nobody had talked about her, so I raised her up and I brought her up. And this lady from Ingleside wrote to me and she said, I grew up in Omaha. I moved out here. Nobody in my family had ever seen a picture. You shared a picture on your website. I found it. My heart is just enlivened. And Jamal, that's my metric. If I can affect one person in that way, be still my beating heart. I mean, that's the goal, is to reconnect people in a meaningful way to this history in a real way.
Good. We've been in action and contact with the Nebraska Historical Society, History Matters, and so on. The Historical Society finally recognized Malcolm X, and again his contributions to Nebraska and obviously the world. Many outsiders and students do not know that Malcolm was born in Omaha. Even if you go and you take classes in Black Studies at UNO and elsewhere, they do not always mention that in their courses. And again, sometimes they don't mention a lot of stuff in those courses. But my question is, what suggestions would you have to help us teach about one of the greatest persons born in Nebraska, Malcolm X, to Nebraskan educators, and of course to other public institutions now that he's gotten voted into the Hall of Fame, Nebraska Hall of Fame?
It's one of the things that's fascinating for me, Jamal, is the way that Omaha can cut and dice the information that people hear, the history that people hear. And so they make it sound, it's all sound bites. And unfortunately, that's what Malcolm X is being turned into and has already been turned into. It's just a sound bite. At most, they might say, oh, he's born in Omaha, but they don't contextualize that. So I would suggest that we look at the context. We help people to understand what exactly we mean when we say Malcolm X was born in Omaha. It's not just Malcolm X was born in Omaha. It was Malcolm X's mom's house was right there. Malcolm X's dad preached right there on that corner. And that corner is 24th and Lake. He was a Baptist minister. He was a preacher involved in Marcus Garvey's movement. And he stood on a soapbox literally and preached on the corner of 24th and Lake in the 1920s. His mom was an organizer as well for Marcus Garvey's organization. And she was all over the neighborhood involved in these women's organizations. Let's talk about those women's organizations. Let's talk about 24th and Lake in the 1920s. Let's also bring up the reality that Adams Park, that people love to go and look at and see and swim at the pool and go to the community center, that's where Malcolm X was born. Oh yeah, Plum Nelly, that's right next to Adams Park. What was Plum Nelly all about? Well, it was actually a community of shanties hidden in a forest. next to Malcolm X's house. So all of that's connected, and we don't tell people about it. We don't connect those dots. We don't talk about the civil rights movement in Omaha that wasn't just happening in the 50s and 60s, but it was happening in the 1910s and 20s, and Malcolm X's family was part of it. We don't talk about that history of blacks going all the way back to the 1870s when they began activating to change the racist system in Omaha. So we have to put context to all of these things. So we quit dicing and parsing out little bits of information and start painting whole pictures that the black community isn't some anomaly. It's not some kind of little tiny thing that's over here. It's this whole city facing a reality that isn't just history, but it's the present as well. Malcolm X isn't just the past. He's everything in Omaha today and so much more.
You know what? We got a couple of questions for
We got to teach people.
throw out at you. And if somebody wanted to catch up with you, Adam, and again, your organization website, how would they do so? And we didn't put that up, but how would they catch up with you? Your information, contact information.
Yeah, so the best way is just to go to northomahahistory.com. Right there, you're going to find my contact information. You're going to find a contact page where you can drop comments. So just northomahahistory.com. Click on the content button. There's actually my phone number is right there. I invite phone calls from Omaha all the time, and I get them all the time. So bring it on. Let's have a conversation. Let's email whatever you want, and we'll get connected that way. The other way, I'm all over Facebook all the time. And so I invite anybody to reach out to me, Adam Fletcher Sasse, SASSE, on Facebook.com as well.
Good. You know, one of my comments, and I've been trying to get the Omaha Public Libraries. I know they have predominantly all-white staff. It's pretty apartheid. And again, it's a public library system, and we all pay taxes. And for those who don't know, Omaha's about 35% people of color, but you can imagine a library situation that has very few people of color working for. But my comment is, we're trying to get people to read more books, and we hope to partner with them, obviously, and other kind of organizations that don't do a lot of that. What can we do to help assist your project, but also to help us talk about this white supremacy and racist system that we live in Omaha, Nebraska, and particularly in this day and age of what's going on in this community and nationally? From your vantage point, how do we deal with some of that?
In 2001, I published a book called #Omaha Black History, African American People, Places, and Events in the History of Omaha, Nebraska. It's 300 pages, and it covers all these different topics in depth. Luckily, the Omaha Public Library System picked it up, and they have copies in 3 or 4 different libraries around the city right now. I need more people to go into the library and insist on checking out that book. Make sure that the public library doesn't just have it in the Charles Washington branch or in the downtown branch, but all over the entire city, especially out in Millard, especially over in Ralston and Elkhorn and all these other corners, to make sure that access to the book isn't just limited to African American people. Again, Black people in Omaha know their history, and if they don't, they're learning it rapidly, and there's lots of ways for them to. However, white people in Omaha are largely ignorant still, no matter what we say or how we view it. They still don't know what this history is or is about. So we have to expose them to more information. In addition to my book, there are more than a dozen other books that touch different elements of Omaha's Black history, whether they are autobiographies by sports stars or great, different books that put together different elements, entertainment, all these different things. #Omaha Black History is the name of my book, and it's all these different topics brought together into one chronological picture. So that's a way that I really suggest that we begin to raise that bar. The other thing that we can do, and not to tout the power of social media too much, but the reality is places like the Durham Museum, places like the Douglas County Historical Society, places like Preserve Omaha, and all these kind of mainstream white-led white history organizations are beginning to awaken to the power of Black history. They're beginning to listen. They say they want to hear, and you know how that works, Jamal, because they say they want to hear, but what are they actually doing? We need people, especially white people, to step up to those organizations and demand for Black history to be represented within them. I want to see a Black history display, not just on the wall at the Durham Museum, but featured predominantly in the Durham Museum. I want to see the Douglas County Historical Society step all the way up to recognize that Fort Omaha was a nice place for white people to be. But why did it exist in the first place, and where have they failed the Black community? Starting in 1919 when Will Brown got lynched, and they didn't call on the Fort Omaha officers to come to the aid of the city first. They called on troops from Missouri. Why was that? So we could begin to dig into these stories. We want these organizations to tell the truth, and we want white people. I specifically want white people to step up and demand of our white peers that they listen to everybody's history, not just the selective history of white supremacy throughout Nebraska and Omaha's history specific.
You know, as you mentioned, Adam, it reminds me of years ago when I was at Catholic Charities. I remember getting an email from the Jewish Community Anti-Defamation League where they offered training for Omaha Public Schools or teachers who taught about the Jewish community or the Holocaust or whatever. And there was an all-day workshop. And I made that suggestion to the Black Studies chair, and they looked over like I was talking Greek or something. But I'm like, how can people teach about your race, your culture, and they maybe just read a comic book? And you got people that you don't know who are white supremacists and people who are Karens and Beckys, trying to teach culture, and students walk in that classroom and they see some of these teachers are individuals who are professors or is bankrupt. Just because you have a PhD in physics or a PhD in English doesn't necessarily mean you know about people's culture. And so, again, one of the things I want to be sensitive to is we have Latino culture, Native American culture, Asian culture, and other cultures that we need to teach in a much more respectful way. And I tell people that when I was an undergraduate in Lincoln, when I took my Native American class taught by a Native American who talked, it was like day and night. It was an epiphany. It woke me up because all that propaganda that was taught in my brainwashing Omaha Public Schools, I had to unwash myself because obviously we're talking lies, and of course they, very sympathetic to Custer and all those other kind of things that happen to Bighorn. But my point is we have to have those indigenous and respective group members teaching and talking about their own culture. And also the point is when I was on the continent, an African brother told me one day, he says, if you really know about our culture and our history, make sure the people who is from that community or that village or that tribe, their names are on the books or they're the artifacts or the griots or whatever. So I go with that same notion. And that's when I get angry when the learning community give the Buffett Institute $3 million to teach about racism, and they practice it every day by not hiring Black men. But let me not get on my editorial comment because, again, I want to respect the audience and so on. One last point I want to answer you. Do you have any closing comments or anything you want to say before we open it up to our listening audience? And again, reviewing audience, rather, because I want them to engage and I want to play the role of the moderator who's the timekeeper. So any other comments before we open it up, Adam?
Well, Jamal, I think one of the biggest things that I can say, and one of the most important things for me to say, is that I'm just honored to be here, man. I really appreciate you taking what I do seriously. I'm challenged by the reality that most white people in Omaha, particularly people in power, are afraid to engage with me because it's not apropos, and they know it. They shouldn't be talking to white people about Black history. And yet they come to me and they begin the conversation, then they back way off. And that's good. I want them to. I don't want to be in the place where I've got to be a white guy who pretends to be an expert on Black history. I'm not. I'm just a learner. I'm just out here trying to cover the tracks. I'm learning these things and trying to share these things and just echo back out what I'm picking up. Now that said, the other thing that I want to say is that I am wide open and want to be available to anybody who comes to me to learn these things, whether that is white people or African Americans or anybody else in the community who really wants to learn and engage with this topic in a serious way, because my heart is available. I will say this, that every quarter I do a presentation at Mount Olive Lutheran Church in the Florence Cathedral community up by Minnelusa. And it's not radical, it's not far out, but it's all about North Omaha. And I'm adamant about including Black history infused into the history of North Omaha, because that's how it is. That's the reality of the situation. I'm available in that same way to everybody in the city. And I'm just looking for more opportunities to engage. So thank you so much for having me here today. And I see you as a comrade, as a co-conspirator in this work, but also I got lots of love for the people who've come, because they're brave people to engage with Jamal, but also in the space where he engages with me. So thank you all, and I appreciate that.
I like what you said. You got to be brave with it, engage with Al-Shabaab, because Al-Shabaab does not, he takes no prisoners in social justice, as we say. In other words, empathy and sympathy for the poor, those at the bottom, the rest of y'all fly a kite. Anyway, at that point, let's open it up for other people to make comments. My role at this point is to be the hostess with the mostest. So any feedback you have from Adam or whoever, let's throw it out there. And let's stay brief if we need to, because we only have 30 minutes to go. Other feedback, other reaction. Open up your mic if you need to. And I know there's a couple of personalities. I know they're not quiet or shy. So I see you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in. Adam, I am new-ish to North Omaha. My family actually started out in Omaha at 3312 North 38th Street, and they moved with the white flight.
Yep.
And so I'm in North Omaha now, and I am hungry for the history And I did just reserve your book from OPL. So I'll be getting that in the next few days to read. But gosh, you say you're open. I would love to sit and discuss and learn and, get more information.
Totally.
Because I want to, this is where I am. This is where I live. This is my home. And I want to be part of it.
And just
And
because of
on
what you
it.
just said, just because of what you just said, the next thing that I'm going to do is make a beginner's guide to North Omaha history, just to give you a place to start. And you send me an email and I'll send that over to you first. Info
Okay.
at North Omaha History comes to me directly.
Okay.
Info at North Omaha History, and I'll put that into the chat. But yeah, hit me up and I'll send that over to you when I'm done.
Terrific. Thank you.
Cynthia, sorry, Cynthia, I see your hand is up. Yes.
Adam, I want to thank you for your education opportunities you give us. Also, I want to thank you for reminding us about OPS, Making History Visible. I learned about that in the year that I was looking for the history of the Native Americans, Omaha, the Indigenous, our First Nation people. And I found such interesting projects on different topics. But the one I learned about for the project I was working on was the tribal judge, I'll probably pronounce his name wrong, but Eduardo Zendejas. And I came across his name again on something I'm working on, and both of his daughters are tribal judges. I think that's the name of the article. I see you nodding, but do you have any other comments on that OPS, Making History Visible? I mean, those young people, it's astounding.
Absolutely. I just put the name of the project there in the chat if anybody wants to look at that. It's Making Invisible Histories Visible. And the whole project has been going for more than a decade now. Hundreds of high school students have been involved in it in the summertime. And basically, it's a summer program that engages students as researchers, and then they write about what they learn about. Sometimes they do oral history, sometimes they do written histories, sometimes they do research, all different kinds of methodologies. But they're writing these wonderful histories of North Omaha, but also South Omaha, Hispanic, Latino, American Indian, Native American, all kinds of history that they're wrapping around their heads around in these projects. A lot of the students are traditionally disengaged, so that it engages them in this new kind of way where they feel empowered by their learning and what they're doing with it, because it's not just a passive learning, it's actively engaging. So it kind of combines those two interests of mine with student engagement and the history component. It's a very powerful and very beautiful project. But also, just if there are any school advocates out there, I see my teacher, Mark Howard Schultz, on the call. Thank you for being here, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Schultz was a high school teacher of mine back in the 90s. So I learned a lot from him. And if there are any advocates for schools who are on here, though, make sure that you reach out to OPS and tell them that you support that project. That project needs all the love and attention it can get fiscally from the district as possible. So make sure that you send a note to OPS, to your school board members, to the superintendent, and just let them know that you support the project and you want it to keep going, making invisible history visible.
By the way, just a quick note, Zindenhoff, Myra Butts, Pat Velasquez, and Art Hill went before the school district board on March, I want to say 28th, 1983, to demand and ask for multicultural education. And it was the first time we had a coalition of us come together of different racial groups. We worked with them for probably about 5 years, but we didn't achieve what we wanted because we wanted to stand it on course like Black history, but just also deal with multicultural education. And the fact that Zindenhoff was there and he's still involved in different things. I'm kind of appreciative. But yeah, we've been knowing that guy for well over 40 years and he's been involved in issues related to the community and so on. But yeah, I saw another hand up here. I think another hand, somebody else raised a hand.
That was me.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elsa Ramon. I am a resident in Lincoln, but used to live in Omaha, and I'm new to Nebraska. Since 2015, I'm from Texas and also lived in Wisconsin. So this is a totally different animal here, and an eye opener, and very, very disappointing. So I am also the president of LULAC, LULAC of Nebraska, which stands for the League of United Latin American Citizens. So I'm the state director here in the state. And one of my outreaches will be to North Omaha because I see the disparities here everywhere, politically, economically, in many different ways, even amongst ourselves. But my question is, because I'm currently working with the university system regents on being more engaged, sensitive, and doing programming for the Latino and for the Black community. And what I want to ask you is, and as you were talking, of course, I'm interested in history and the background and all that. But more importantly, right now, the question for me is, how does it impact our people? And I consider the African American community and the Latino community similar. How does it impact us, our lives, economically, being able to obtain jobs, quality of life? And the thing that comes to mind is the critical race theory issue, because our current governor stood up and fought with the regents about bringing it to the university system. So obviously he's gone. I have 3 friendly regents that are working with my group, but it's an uphill battle. And I want to know what your thoughts are on that. And if I don't answer, if called upon, I'm waiting for a call from my daughter, so I apologize, but I'll still be in the meeting. So whoever wishes to engage, or Adam, if this is the you question, please.
Jamal, do you want to go first on that? I would like to hear you speak to that personally.
You know, one of the challenges that we're facing is that one of the things we've been in this city is divided. Again, one of the things I try to do as a Catholic chair is how do you bring the various groups together? And a lot of organizations don't do that. And again, if you look at terms of our common history, when you start to talk about what happened to Asian American, Chinese immigrants, and the railroads, and Latinos, and how the land was taken from them and many was deported, and the Trail of Tears, and the traditional stuff we learn about. But as you go and dig deeper, we had the same hideous treacherous behaviors committed against all groups. And one of the things we have not done well is bring us together, because as a united force, we need to do that to push back at some of this craziness. But there's a common thread that goes in American history and culture that deals with oppression and racism and xenophobia, you name it. And so the more we get people who are cultural I would say bridges, and there are not a lot of people who are very comfortable moving around in different circles. We have to do a better job. And again, when I look at the education department, whether it be the State Department of Education, you name it, they're woeful feet, they're inadequate to do that. And I think we have to do a better job, because it's like reading Isabel Wilkerson, The Warmth of the Other Sun, of people migrating. It spoke to all of us. People who even came from Europe looked at that, at Jamaica, you name it. So I think we just got to do a better job of pushing our institutions and not ostracize groups. And again, I find it treacherous when the Jewish Anti-Defamation League group can go to Lincoln and get a law passed about the Holocaust and studying about what happened in Germany and genocide, but we won't talk about Native Americans or African American and what happened during the slavery. So again, if we're going to talk about people's oppression, we need to be much more inclusive. And again, I will stop there to say the proof is in the pudding. I wish our Black studies and Latino studies would do a better job of working together along with Asians and Native Americans and other people who are oppressed. And we're kind of woefully inadequate and I think cognitively challenged. But I'll stop there and let you go from there, Adam.
Could I
Elsa,
say something before you speak, Adam?
Please.
And I know it's all of you, but I wanted to Elsa, excuse me, she made me laugh, which is sad that I had to laugh at what she said. Coming to Omaha, coming to Nebraska, period, is a different kind of animal. And when you look at, and the reason why I laugh and say, what your history that you have written down, Adam, it is no different. It's just done a different way. The same things that you have written about the history in Black, because I have followed you and read a lot of the articles you put out, but it's the same thing that was years ago that you have the history and hasn't changed. And then I also want to say, and Aljamal, we go around, but yes, we need to do a better job. But I'm tired of it always being we are the ones that have to do the job. Adam, as you mentioned earlier, it's upon your people. It's upon you to get your people to come around and to understand. And so
That's right.
this is the same thing we've been talking about over and over. And before I give, there's one thing I have followed on your criminal justice. I can't remember exactly the title you have about how it has been in the blacks have been treated by the police department and so forth throughout history. And I'm wondering, are you doing anything now or to bring it up to where we are right now? Because it is such a, the lies that are put out through the 360 and the empowerment network and the police chief and the mayor and all of those, which, and I say it lies because they are lies. So I'm wondering, are you putting anything or working on anything to bring all of that history up about the criminal injustice through the justice system in Nebraska? Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for stopping me talking. Seriously, I don't need to talk that much. and honestly, I don't need to talk to and I say this cautiously. I don't need to speak to and don't ever mean to represent myself as speaking towards the experience of people of color in Nebraska or anywhere. I don't know. I'm still, no matter how I slice the pie, I'm just a goofy white guy. That said, I'm gonna parking lot your question for just a second, Cheryl. I'm gonna come back to it, I promise. But I want to speak to Elsa's question, because Elsa, what I can tell you, I cannot tell you your questions as they pertain specifically to Black people, Hispanic, Latino, Asian American, Native American folks. Again, I have a limitation in my blinders, right? That said, what I can say in response to what you asked specifically is that white people are suffering. And we are suffering from our own ignorance. We are suffering from our own indifference. We are suffering from our own white supremacy. But basically, our hearts are hollowed out here. We are losing the spirit, the spiritual self that we could have and should have because of the oppressive factories, not only that we had historically, but the way that we perpetuate them today. And the loss of that soul, it's breaking us up. You look across white America today, and it's obvious there are outcomes for our white supremacy on ourselves, and it's breaking us up. And I don't mean that in some collective sense. I don't identify with a lot of white people in America, but what I do identify with is the reality that I'm a white guy, and there aren't a lot of white people that I can talk to this about straightforwardly. I do it anyway. I upset a lot of people. I don't get jobs because of it, but I do it because I have to. I feel a moral imperative that I was taught by people of color that I need to do this. I've got to step up. No white person taught me how to do this. No white person said that I needed to go do this. Nobody's empowering me in the background, but I still hear the stories that Mrs. Hickerson told me at 27th and Ellison in the 80s about growing up as a young African-American person in Omaha in the 1920s and 30s. She told me those stories, they stuck in my mind. Mrs. Abernathy, who lived next door, who still lives next door on Ellison Avenue, taught me those stories from the 60s and 70s. Edu Mahili, Ernest Sneds, he taught me those stories. Laura Partridge Ned taught me those stories. All of the people around me taught me those stories and insisted that I know what happened. Reverend Helen Saunders taught me that Malcolm left Omaha and went to Detroit for a reason, because she moved from Detroit to come back to Omaha to open up her church in North Omaha. All of that stuck in my head, and it created this moral imperative, but I didn't know what to do with it. So then I read Martin Luther King Jr., then I read Malcolm X, then I read Franz Fanon, then I read, and it's blown up my mind, it's blown up my heart, and it's restored a little tiny bit of my soul that I don't know that all of my white friends have. And I don't know if we're allowed to have it. I don't know if we can have it, because we have people who are whiter than me, even though we're all the same. They are out there piping up the opposite line, that Black history doesn't matter, that brown people don't matter, that this reality isn't real. And I need to confront that. And my white colleagues, my white friends, my white family, my white people that I don't know, we've got to confront that among ourselves, just like you just said, Cheryl. So to bring that full circle then, Cheryl, what I'll say to you is that, no, I'm not doing enough. I dig up the history, I tell the stories, I make some graphics, I put it out on social media, but I live 1,500 miles away from Omaha, and I limit myself in that way. I make myself available in this way however I can, but I don't go to the police chief's office. I don't go to UNO's criminal justice classes. I've guest spoke at a couple at Creighton. That's as far as I've gotten. But we need, for me to get in there, and we need folks just like me to get in there. But the reality is there's a very small window of opportunity for me in Omaha at any given point. And I like my physical well-being, and I need to make money in my life. So until I can figure out how to ensure both of those and be in Omaha at the same time to do this advocacy work, I'll stay here from 1,500 miles away and keep doing the best that I can with what I have. And as soon as I can do more, I will, for sure, Cheryl. But thank you for calling that out.
You know, it's
And
funny.
Elsa, thank you for your question.
That's funny. I like what
Question.
you said that. By the way, I went to the police office one day for a tour to meet with the chief. He ducked out, and then another guy gave me a tour, and we got to talk about stuff. And it was obvious he was trying to brainwash me. I was trying to explain to this officer that no, I know what went on because I grew up here, but it was painful to sit in that building and see all the stuff that's there. I felt like I was in the Klan headquarters. I'm not being funny. The same way when I went to the FBI building, it was all white folks. I saw one black guy walk and look, he was lost. I don't know if he was a prisoner or what, but my point is you should not go into public buildings where we're paying taxes and not have different racial groups represented as employees, as managers, and so on. But again, the police department's got to do a much better job to clean up their cesspool. And I say that based upon my experience living here, but also just in how they are today, because whenever I write to the black police chief there, the female, no response, no letters. But let me stop there. Let other people raise questions, comments. This is about you at this point. Other feedback.
Okay, I just wanted to say one last thing here. Thank you, Ms. Weston, for your observation. And somebody mentioned economic development, and I'm very well aware of the grants, and there's already controversy surrounding them in both North and South Omaha. But I'm thankful that they're there regardless. My organization is primarily a civil rights organization, and I'm not going to limit it to Latinos, Hispanics. I obviously embrace other people that are facing injustices. I know that I've asked Mr. Biden to join us or to partner with us. And so recently, back this fall, and I don't mean to make this about us, we took on the city council for the lack of an appointment of appointing a Latino, 10 qualified Latinos, many of them with master's degrees and experience. And what did they choose? They chose a white guy. You know, this is city council. And so, and then there's the issues with the university, and it's just everywhere. So our goal is to take on the systemic racism, whether it's Latino or the Black community, and try to make a change. We have a long arm legislatively, so I'm emboldened by that, and I'm thankful for that. But at the end of the day, I see the racism and the systemic issues here every single day, whether in Lincoln, whether I'm at the legislature, or whether I'm visiting South Omaha, Omaha in general, or even the North Omaha community. So that was
Elsa, one quick question for you, and I know Adam knows Omaha pretty well. Is there somebody in Lincoln who promotes or talk about Latino culture, history in the same sense of a lay position? Is there people like that you know of who are like we call grassroots historians or elders who are very knowledgeable of the history of the experience in Lincoln? Do you know anybody like that yourself?
There is. We have Dr. Marty Ramirez. I don't know if he's known to you all, but he is a Purple Heart veteran. He's in his late 70s. He probably wouldn't want me to mention his name, but he is either on the historical commission or the foundation, and I think you and I discussed this. So he tries, but you know, it's hard. Oops, sorry. I apologize. Let me get back here in a minute. I got to take this call.
Well, the reason I threw that is because Adam and I talked about the importance of creating more historians and lay history. And again, you don't necessarily have to have a degree. You can just start doing some serious reading and book discussions and learn about your culture. And plus, we said there are a lot of elderly folks who know a lot of history of our communities, and we need to bring them to our classrooms and help some of this new generation. Cynthia, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I sent a quote in the chat, but the people not on chat won't see it. This is in reference to the 234 million grants that was North and South Omaha. And the article said at the end, commenting on Senator McKinney and Senator Wayne's input. And I followed those two because they were putting so much energy into getting money for the grants, from the grant. And the ending sentence is, sadly, this will ultimately continue to perpetuate the community's reliance on nonprofits, rather than helping to build an economically self-sustaining community. And that reminded me of you, Oswald, because these nonprofits, are they, not because to what I'm saying, but you often talked about there's so many nonprofits. And I'm just asking myself, so if these nonprofits could get together, and do they talk about building a self-sustaining community, or are they more focused on what their own kindness and charity will do? That's a judgment kind of on my part, but if the community is going to rely on nonprofits, are these nonprofits also helping to build self-sustaining community?
Adam, I see you.
Jamal, I'm going to take that. Yeah.
But no,
let me
I would argue use what my friend Paul Bauman says, use reverse engineering. If you look at conditions of our community, you look at how much money we spend over the years, you look at these nonprofits that basically serve themselves and they don't have outreach. If you stand outside the door of some of them, you'll see very few people going in there. And so again, when we held a community forum with a school board member about a week ago, she shared that they rarely do that. In actual fact, the administrators dissuade them from trying to engage the community. And again, I found that sad because Mark can go back, way back, where board members used to go out in community forums all over, and they'd be out there. Even the superintendent used to come out and do community forums like yearly in different places. So some kind of way we've lost our way. But I think some of these nonprofits need to do strategic plan, bring in some of the people they serve and ask them what they really need. Because again, the amount of money they get and the money we spend in these dollars, sometimes we don't see the outcomes. And I think we just need to challenge ourselves and do evaluations. How good are we doing? When you go to a restaurant, they ask you, what was the food like? Well, we need to do that for many of these nonprofits because, again, it's one of those things we need to talk about. The other thing I would go back to Adam is that I even question how many people can read his articles and books. Again, teachers are complaining that some of these students are graduating and they're not functionally literate. And again, the school board member said she had to take remedial classes at the university. Well, what's going on? Let's talk about that. So if we're going to study history, we got to know how to read and write to a certain level. And again, I don't say you have to be the most prolific writer, but at least be able to read and write some stuff so you can communicate and leave breadcrumbs for that next generation, because sometimes we don't have oral historians in our society like they do in African cultures and other countries. So it's very important to be able to read and write. But yeah, you're right. Our nonprofits have got to step up their game, and even more so because we become much more of a divisive, mean-spirited society, and it's not about war and bombs. Yes, I say
So Elsa, let me just jump in here real quick on Jamal. I just want to say really quick, to Elsa, to your point, there is a nonprofit cabal in Omaha. It's a small group of nonprofit organizations that absorb the majority of the money and ensure the city's charitable focus maintains in specific directions. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just the way the system is designed and the way that it perpetuates itself. North Omaha specifically has echoed that system, where there is a handful of nonprofits that are absorbing the majority of the income, and they are not echoing that back out. They soak up the money, they do their mission, they fulfill their grant objectives, and then they move on to the next grant. They're not building community, they're not fostering a sense of holistic connectivity. It's just, that's not how that system works. So just to speak to your point a little bit, this money that you mentioned specifically will go to reinforce those cabals, the way that system works. And that's just the way it is. It's just going to happen. Jamal, to your point,
with you. I can't let that go. I cannot
please.
I have to disagree with you because I've been involved in Omaha for years. Not even going to tell that part. But the small North Omaha has over 300 and some nonprofits. The big nonprofits, which contain and get all the money, you were talking about how to work together. They do not want that because that is not the strategy. The strategy.
Sure, I think you guys are on the same page. You basically said the same thing.
Well, let me finish. Is that the strategy is to keep the small ones down to where they are, because they will never get the amount to sustain themselves. They will always have to be scratching to get it. That 234 for South Omaha, 65% went to the nonprofits who are, and that money was for infrastructure on certain projects. That How is that going to contain jobs? How is that going to put jobs out there? Yes, it may have jobs for a moment while they're digging up the dirt and they're building up the rent. And then most of the time, those companies that get that job will not be anybody or any companies in that area. So to say that nonprofits here in Omaha are going, there is seven families. It's been that way, and I certainly can't foresee it changing, because what happens when one kicks the bucket, they've already passed it on down. And I don't mean to seem so cold and callous, but they've already passed it down to the son-in-law, or whoever is to carry on, because that is the way the system is set up. And part of that, we owe that, have to be held accountable. When I say we, Black folks in South, North Omaha, and Hispanics in South Omaha, and any racial group, is that what we do, we allow them to divide us, and we get, each one gets a little group so that we can get this money. It's not going to be enough to do your projects or whatever. It's going to be just enough to think you're going to have to apply next year and decide if you are. But if you are part of the system, and I call all of them, whether it's South, North, if you are part of the Masters House Negro group, you will continue to receive funding. And I know that there's some out there listening and it goes back to them. I have no problem with that at all, because it is the truth. And I can lay down and know that it is the truth. So these nonprofits talking about working with, they don't want to work. They don't want to bring individuals onto their board to say, is this what you need? They all feel they know what we need. Plus, and I'll end it after this, I have seen through the city and others, look at what HUD gives to the city of Omaha for people who are low income or disadvantaged. Not millions, but billions over the time. Every single year they get multi-millions. There is no way that they want to see. They need North Omaha and South Omaha to stay in the positions that they are, because it keeps bringing money.
Joel,
I'm gonna get off and let somebody else have something to say.
We're gonna have to stop this point, because I'm gonna give Adam a chance for the last word, and then I'm gonna do a little closing and a little advertisement for our next event. But Adam, we were down to we got a couple of minutes left, and I just want to give you a chance to say a few things, and I'm gonna close out. And again, people can catch up with Adam through his contact on the webpage and so on. But Adam, any other closing comments you would make for our participants tonight?
Jamal, thank you so much, and thank you everybody who spoke up, especially Cheryl and Elsa and all the rest of you brave souls. I appreciate you all. Jamal, to your last question, and it's just burning on my head to say it. I have had to learn how to speak the language of modernity in order to get this message out. So I have 8 books about North Omaha's history that are available. Some of them are free online. Some of them you get through Amazon.com. I have that website with all the articles, NorthOmahaHistory.com. But the place where I've gotten the most traction is social media. I've learned to make stupid little graphics. I've learned to put together silly little YouTube videos. I've learned to share other people's content and how to interact with people online, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. I call it white supremacy. It's kind of a hobby. It's pretty fun and interesting. But it's only in speaking the modern vernacular of social media that I've actually made any leeway. I take the resources from the big dogs, from the Durham Museum and from the Historical Society and any other source I can find, and I share them back out. I put out those 100-year-old pictures. I put out that content and that data and that information to make sure that young people today are reading the history that they didn't get in school, that they didn't get from their moms and dads and aunts and uncles and grandparents, but that they get instead from social media. I haven't TikTok video yet. If somebody wants to step ahead of me, go on to TikTok and start talking about North Omaha history, because you could blow it up there. And then the last thing that I'll say is that we've got to stay ahead of the dragon on this, because the fact of the matter is, no matter what my well intentions are, Jamal, no matter how much power you have and exercise and really use to this advantage, the fact of the matter is, there's always more oppressive forces that are bearing down on the conversation, whether we're talking about people engaging in the situation or about history specifically, or about Black people or brown people or poor people. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. That oppressive boot is always coming down. So thank you all so very, very much for your time and energy. Look at NorthOmahaHistory.com. hit me up there, read my books, and let's stay in touch. Cheryl, I'll be getting in touch with you.
Folks, as we grind down here, one of the things I'd like to do is give you a chance to give us feedback on the show and evaluation. We're also looking at bringing some other guests onto the show. We're going to probably do some shows on Wednesday evening about this time and have guests come in and do the same format where they talk for 30 minutes and then we open it up. Next week, we have Elsa's going to come and talk about the Latino experience. And we're trying to get more LULAC and build coalitions by letting people get their voices out there, because our traditional media does not always focus on some of the grassroots and grass tops and people in our community who are doing good work. So you'll see more from us. We'd like you to go and do an evaluation of this event, but also to make suggestions on other topics and issues that you would like to have us cover. We're hoping to do a little bit more during Black History Month, but also, as we say, in more, we really like to bring people together and do some of these in-person forums, but also some of these Zoom and Facebook forums. So really appreciate you being here tonight. It's been a pleasure. And Adam, again, thank you from speaking from Washington on high. Is it Olympics or Olympia, whatever? But again, it's someplace far away. But we appreciate that you still have your Nebraska roots and able to help bring us a lot of light about issues that affect our community, our city, and our state. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Aljamal. Thank you, everybody.
We hope you join us again next time. As we always say, may the force be with you. Baroko.